I panic clicked. Whatever. Connection is working okay, which is good because it kind of wasn't before. The 3 stream, I mean. And that's a good time to lower the music to get this started. And now we can go to, well, assuming things don't fall over. Whoa. Anyway, yes. Trading internet, I'm B-Nuts. Welcome to the stream. And also, good morning. As you can see, we're doing something a bit different here. Today, I am going to be going over, going to explore and show for you my RWBY Gunpla Project. And if I have time, we will explore some other plastic models which I have. But I wanted to take the opportunity to show you some of my customized Gunpla, my Gundam plastic models, which I had modeled after some of the characters from the hit Rooster Teeth show RWBY. And I also want to do this more or less now because I've had these on my shelves for a while now, and it only gets further away from the time when I did these. They're not all complete, but it seems like a good time now to show these off. You'll probably also notice that they are, because I did them a while ago, they're not based on their most recent outfits. They're more based on the Mistral outfits that they had at the time during volumes 4 and 5, and I believe 6. They changed in 7. So these are what they are, and I'll also present to you what exactly the RWBY Gunpla is and what it represents, at least for me. Probably. Check. Music level is okay. It's soft for me. Doesn't really matter so long as it's still in the background or whatever. But in any case, the RWBY Gunpla Project, which I undertook because I really enjoyed RWBY, and because the designs and the characters, the weapons, and everything, they were really inspirational, and I believed that they would translate well into Gunpla, and to a certain extent I believe I'm correct. We'll also see that there's also an in-universe and out-universe explanation for them. So that's more or less the out-universe. In-universe, they would be created by a a person who was interested in Huntresses and Huntsmen and how Aura works, more or less an OC of mine who had been brought up in Atlas, was a researcher. His parents also researchers studying Aura, the effects of Aura, and how to create them, so it would be kind of connected as well to the Penny Project. Also, spoilers for RWBY if you haven't been watching it. But Aura is a major thing within the universe of RWBY. All living things can create Aura. Thank you for following For Gathers. I really appreciate it. All living things have Aura within the universe of RWBY. Only the creatures of Grimm do not, as they are creatures of destruction and darkness. And while all living things do have Aura, not everything can control them. As well, huntresses, and huntsmen who can have further control over the Aura have superpowers called semblances. And they fight bandits and the creatures of Grimm in order to protect the small pockets of civilization that exist within the world of Remnant that RWBY takes place in. One thing which might help them, especially against the larger creatures of Grimm, would be mobile suits. So I reimagined the mobile suits basically being built from the ground up. They'd be powered by something called Aura drivers rather than the power generators that they have within Mobile Suit Gundam, the franchise, which would work somewhat similar to GN drives, but not really, because they would be able to generate small amounts of auras on their own, but their abilities would be enhanced a great deal if they were being piloted by the huntsmen and huntresses that they were intended for. The Aura drivers would be able to boost their ability to a great degree, since otherwise there'd be basically no point in them having massive mechs other than to have them at a larger size to be able to take on the larger Grimm, sure, but the power magnification ability of a mobile suit is an entirely different thing. And so these would enable these warriors to be able to do so much more, to be able to fight on a whole other scale, thereby rationalizing their own existence within the series. And I also did come up with the inclusion of Gunpla before we had mechs or larger mechs within RWBY. We already had the Elysian Paladin, but those are much smaller than a mobile suit from Mobile Suit Gundam. Now, I do have to give the details that these are made and repainted using Gundam Markers. These are markers like this one, which you shake and you get the paint out. There's paint inside reservoirs inside the markers, and they come out. The thing that I would like to disclaim about these is that because of the applicator, they come out in fairly narrow bands, so they're good for small areas mostly. Otherwise you end up being able to see brush marks, which I bet you can see on most of these, and that doesn't look as good as if you were to go by hand or airbrush, but I don't have an airbrush, so I used what I did have, which was that. So just so you know, I use Gundam Markers almost exclusively when I paint. I do hit bashing with other model kits and with other accessories. As you can see, some of those are MSG, they're Kotobukiya. Other stuff, really not. But otherwise, the customizations are fairly simple. So here we have, rotating on my stand, Team RWBY itself, their mechs, their mobile suits. Not all of them are Gundam, and I will talk about them one at a time. I don't have names, or I don't remember names for all of them. I might have actually put them somewhere. See. I actually just had a list of candidates for the Plamo that I could use to base them on, but I'm much further than where that was. I thought I had a list of all the names, but I guess I don't have them anywhere that I could get them from conveniently. But in any case, RWBY's I called the Akabara, which means red thorn or red rose. Blake's was the, since her weapon is the Gamble Shroud, the Astray Shroud. Yang's the Burning Sun, probably. And the Weiss's was the Face? No. It translated to snowflake in German. Schneeflocken, that's what it was. Because her name is German, so her Gundam had to be Snowflake, which is what Klein calls her. That's his nickname for Weiss, which I thought was really cute. So, Schneeflocken Gundam. Yeah, I can talk about them each individually in turn. I will try to be fairly fast as well. This one is, it tends to be back heavy. I will set it on back there in case it wants to fall backwards. And allow RWBY's first to take center stage. So, RWBY's Akabara set this down more fully. RWBY's Akabara takes the HGUC Sinanju as its basis. The HGUC Sinanju is one of my favorite ever builds, not just among the high grades, but ever, because it has so much to it, and Bandai put in so much engineering. Even though it's fairly old, it has superb part separation in the plastic, and as you could see, move this further away, otherwise the scythe will bump Blake. And even though you have most of the parts now painted, it has such good part separation. Putting it together, I had to remind myself numerous times that it is in fact a high grade. And this is even assembling the feet. All of the parts are separate parts. All of these are separate parts. Everything is separate, and the only stickers that you really needed for it were the mono eye and for the sights on the original gun. That's basically it. But the sticker sheet was huge, of course. Why was it huge? Well, because of all the sleeves marking, all of the emblems, which of course I wasn't using for this. For this, I just painted on the other stuff, and she wouldn't be sleeves because RWBY isn't. but you can still see some of the raised bits on it where they would go, like on the chest, which meant that you could always just paint it rather than using the stickers, which was what I did when I first built the Sinanju on its original configuration rather than as rubies. And of course this is based on her, again, as I said, the volume 4 outfit that she wears. So I actually have a statue of that I can bring for comparison so that you can see what exactly I used as the inspiration when I went for this. I'll bring her in without the scythe so you can see this is the season 4 statue of her, and you can see the boots, the thigh highs. On art, she has a rose on one, but it's not visible here. And of course, there are also buckles on her boots, which are pretty action girl. And even though her thematic color is red, she does have a lot of black. She always had a lot of black on her outfit. But a pretty good demonstration here. Her sleeves and over here are all white, and then she has the black on her cuffs, the red in the middle, and the black around there, and the black all around her skirt and on her belt, with the bullets also here. So that's what I based it on, or as well as her rose emblem up here instead of down here as it was in Volume 1. And in looking for places to put her personal emblem, there weren't a lot of spaces for it, so I just popped it up here, and I used a panel lining marker in order to do that. Is this the best version of the Sinanju? It is the most solid. It's definitely solid. It's not the best looking. That's between this and the standard Sinanju. It's a customization for full frontal. It's not standard by any means. But I went with the Sinanju because it's such a fast unit within its own series. And because, well, Ruby Rose, and this rose has thorns, doesn't it? So it seemed to go along with her speed. The only things that I encountered were, well, I couldn't make Crescent Rose, her highly customized 5-speed sniper scythe. So I actually used one from the For You prize. So that's what she has here. So she has spikes on her shoulders for some further offense ability. I did open up the eye a bit to be able to look in and see that I had painted that silver, as well as the Vulcans on the head. And there is that rose that I'm so proud of. I did it with negative spacing with the paint. And to enhance her speed, of course, there are little thruster bells underneath in the legs as well. I thought it would be interesting too. I kept the fuel tanks, the external fuel tanks. In this case, they would store additional aura so that she could move more freely, more swiftly as well. And of course, these open, but unlike the RG, the thrusters don't come out at all. But it is an extremely fast unit, and so I believe that it suits RWBY well. I did take away most of the weapons that she had, that Sinanju had. I felt that RWBY, she emphasizes her speed and offense ability rather than the defense. So the shield didn't really serve her purposes. So I let her keep her scythe the extra large version of Crescent Rose. And were this the normal version, there would be a pair of beam sabers up in her cuffs as well. So she would still have those as backup weapons, but of course her main is her beloved Crescent Rose. So emphasizing her speed, and the armor on this would be all the defense that she would need, because her main focus as a huntress, of course, is her semblance, her petal burst, which allows her to disperse and then move and reappear elsewhere. And she can use that for mobility, she can use that for defense, she can use that to set up surprise attacks as well. And I think that it would work a bit more like quantization from Gundam 00, where it becomes particleized, moves, and then reassembles in another place. So it definitely suits RWBY in that it can enhance her speed and all of her abilities as a warrior. So that is the Akabara. Again, not a Gundam, because the Sinanju is not a Gundam, but that is perfectly okay. I will put that aside. Wanted to put it on the ground, but falls over. Next, because I want to go in letter order, we have Weiss's unit, the Schneeflocken. And of course, I use the asymmetrical Wind Gundam Fenice, because Weiss's design has been asymmetrical. And I wanted to follow the design of her Volume 4 self with the fading. I noticed that in her first outfit, she had the lighter stuff up top and then faded down to a darker color at the bottom. Here it was actually reversed. So the darker stuff is at the top, the lighter stuff is at the bottom. But I can't do fades. So this is what it ended up being, as she does have some red in her costume design. And the irony being, of course, the wing units are shorter than the others. So RWBY, who is one of the shortest members of the team, being that she's also one of the youngest, ended up in one of the larger units. Weiss ended up in one of the shorters. But, that's also perfectly fine. So this is just a straight up repaint. She does have an aura shield coming up out of one of the shoulders, which I thought would be really useful for her. This version of Martinaster, of course, I had to paint in some colors so that it would be able to show that she has different dust chambered. One thing that bothered me about the way Weiss was presented in series is that she mostly focused on using ice dust, and yet she's perfectly capable of using them all. So I restored her ability to use all of them to give her better versatility in this unit, and yet she still has a version of Martinaster which she can shoot and slash and charge with. And as you can see, even in the top of the wings, she has different dust colors available to her. And of course, they can move out. If you could imagine these faded rather than all of the sudden going from one color to the other, then you could get more of an idea of what I was going for. And of course, her aura driver shows up through the shoulder here in multiple places. Another thing that bothered me about Weiss was that she didn't have enough knockdown power. Of course, if she's going with her team, this is less of an issue, But for those times when she has to take on a tricky enemy on her own, well, what's better than the Wing's own Buster Rifle? And this is the original with 3 cartridges, and as you can see, they each have a different dust color indicated. Plus, the second rifle attached onto the bottom. So, the Schneeflocken gives Weiss additional power, additional versatility. I don't have it here, but there is an energy blade that attaches onto the bottom of the gun. So she also has additional melee options. But her main thing is that she does have the ability to strike more powerfully at an enemy than she ever did in the show. And she can support her team even more fully because she has additional power in here. And that also validates the use of the mobile suit as opposed to just leaving her to fight on her own. So, additional power for Miss Weiss Schneep. Whoops. And I wish it hadn't just fallen over like that, but it is what it is. Unfortunately, part of the design of these model kits, because of the hand design, the hand backing can come off very, very easily. But I wanted to show that Weiss has these additional options for her power. And fell off again, but Next up we have Blake's Astray Shroud, and I'm not going to bother setting it down. Whereas the choices for RWBY and Weiss were more obvious, not everyone may have wanted to go with the Astray Gold Frame Amatsumina for Blake. For one thing, it has no cat ears, although the antennae are somewhat like them. They might remind more people of beetles. But I wanted to go with this because of the stealthier aspects of the gold frame, even though it is gold. Ta-da! Gold all over the place. But there were aspects about this that I thought were more suited to Blake than for anyone else, even though the colors on Blake's outfit turned out to be not all that much suited towards stealth. And here you can see I've got the white of her long jacket on the back of the backpack, which of course has all these different aspects to it. The extending claws, the harpoons, which also came with a wire so that you could extend. I put the scabbard for the MSG samurai sword onto the backpack. I just glued it on there on the side. I had to find a place where it could be most out of the way, and that's what I came up with. You've got the claws down here, at least on one side. I skipped them on the other side because I wanted to wrap this around. This is like, these are like the ribbons on Gamble Shroud, so that she has them. So this would be the cleaver side, this would be the blade side. And then the twist tie, which I had to thread through here, going all the way up the arm, in that it's both out of the way but still in a cool place. Thank you for the follow, Deprived Life. I really do appreciate it. And in this case, I put Blake's emblem down here on her leg, or at least I tried to. It was kind of hard to do at this scale with the markers, but I did do my best with that. It might be a bit more showy than is intended for Blake, who is essentially a ninja, but I think these colors work for her. And I think that it shows her growing self-confidence. And now that she's got this unit, she does have a lot of power behind her. She can strike fast, strike with surprise a lot of times, despite all the colors, and be thoroughly not only aggressive, but brutal in a lot of ways with this unit. She has the claws that can come out and wrap around and hook her enemy. She has the harpoons, and she still has Gamble Shroud and everything else. Some of this was hard to customize other parts. It was just fun though, trying to decide which parts to include into it. And I think I did a good job with this. But having to decide which parts that I could do, which parts that I had to skip, well, that stands for all of them. And so this is what I ended up with for Blake, and I do think that I did a good job. The only problem with it, of course, is the weight distribution. So it's very back heavy. Normally it would be falling all over, but now it's deciding to stand up. But in any case, that's Blake's Astray Shroud. No, it's a pretty good unit, I still think. There we go. And I'm glad that I went with the high grade rather than the RG, which I also have, because it'd be a shame to cover all the details that are in the real grade. This served better. And the last thing that you probably should notice is that the arms match, because it comes with sets so that you can make both arms the same, even though on the Astray Goldframe of Matsumina, one of them is the Blitz arm. You still have the Blitz shoulder, because you can't create two of the Astray shoulders, but you do have the option to create two Astray arms, and that is what I went with because they're symmetrical on both and everything like that. So this was a lot of fun to create and kind of muddle through what I had to do in order to finish it off. So that is Blake. The final member of Team RWBY, although we're far from done with this project, is Yang's. And I really didn't want to name it the Burning Sun because of sun. But Shanglong being Sunny Little Dragon, so sun is the sun is part of her theme. But I wanted to create something that would reflect her growth and her evolution within the series as it was at the time. And she was learning to control her temple more, and she had some trauma to get over, losing part of her arm and everything else, and possibly the possibility of losing her sister, everything else. Yang's had a lot of growth in the series, and I wanted to reflect that and reflect her relationship with the rest of her family as well, because family is incredibly important to Yang Xiaolong. I chose as her base the Tri-Burning, and she also has some parts from the Denial Gundam. As you can see, I put one arm is from the Tri-Burning, the other arm is from the Denial, and I also used the head from the Denial so that I could give her her hair. Oops. That's alright. And so she has a bit of the parts from the Denial, and also I use purple because her eyes are purple, again reflecting growth. And I left her in this way with some of the parts in the flame to show what that would look like as well. But I left some of the clear blue parts on as well. And I did paint under those so that they would reflect the light better. And I thought that would work better to show underneath there. There is a ponytail with swivels that comes with the denial. But I wanted to display her for a bit with the full hair on. And as you can see, you can still see some sparkles. From the original piece, it's purple. But you can also see up here where I was painting on this side, and it blocks the sparkles. This is because I painted underneath in order to try to keep the sparkles so that they would be visible. So I went from the underside instead, and I think that worked out much better. And it looks cooler that way. I did decide to give her a bit of a further evolution option in the blade, the wrist blade. And there was a limited ability to paint that up. But I did what I did with the hair as well. As you can see there, that looks pretty solid gold. Up here, you've got the sparkle. So I liked that effect of it. And of course, with the tri-burning, you can switch out the blue parts for the orange part. That's one thing that I didn't really like about the Kamiki burning. There's no ability to switch those out for its amped up form. It's just stuck in what it is. But Yang, she's changed, she's grown a lot, and even though I didn't really like the way that she was somewhat regressed in the more recent volumes, I still believe in the growth that she has. The trickiest part here was because I didn't have the brown for her boots. I used instead the Real Touch brown that I got first, and this runs on your hands. So I had to color, leave it for a while, and then now I can touch it without it running on my hand. But that's because I left it alone for long enough, and it's done like that. There's not a whole lot else to say about Yang's unit. Of course, she's got her semblance, her ability to absorb damage and then deal it back. And you'll notice there was never any shield on this unit. So she can take that damage, but she also has the ability to evade, to outwit her enemies, her opponents, and to do better that way. So that's Yang and her unit. And it is powerful, but other than if she was to fire off blasts from her cuffs, and from there, she doesn't have a whole lot of longer range options, but she is going to come in brutally swiftly and defeat her enemies. Also, she's going to be working with her team. So that's why she is there the way she is. So I will bring in the next team, and in the meantime, I will go to a standby stream. Let's see if these guys will stay up. Go, Team Juniper. Will you enjoy those going around? They're somewhat of a nightmare to pose up together like this because they're so large and weighty. But in any case, here they are, kind of. And I'm kind of surprised that they're not falling over again. But we have Pyrrha's unit. I was tempted to call it the Destiny because she asked, do you believe in Destiny? But I will call it the Faith unit. We have the Ren's Lotus Gundam. We have Nora's Laughter, spelled after haha rather than laughter, the IBO character, and the Strategy, John's unit. And as you can see, I did a little bit more painting here. Some of these were more of a pain than others, but they work on the same theory as the others. So again, I will remind you that within the RWBY Gunpla Project, these machines, these mobile suits, are driven by an aura driver. They can generate a slight amount of aura on their own. However, their ability is magnified when they are piloted by the Huntsmen and Huntresses for whom they are intended. And they can further amplify semblances, making them even more powerful within the series. So now, let's stop them and go through Team Juniper. Friends especially is a pain because of that huge backpack, and I'm thinking I'll just remove it altogether. Laughter at the side here will stand. Sorry, Pyrrha, but I do need you somewhat out of the way for this. So the Strategy starts off with the beginning J. Yes, I do believe that I said which units I used for the others. And then I added Sinanju's shield and its beam saber to the mix, because I thought those more fully expressed John's weapons and his style at the time. The thing about mounting this shield is that it's not precise, it's not exact. I put it into the slot here, and it forces these the armor apart, but it's still much better than anything else that this unit had originally. But without this shield, you can see more fully how I've repainted the armor so he has a lot of white and gold trim, making him look a bit more like a golden knight. I also have the red for Pyrrha's sash painted around his waist, because this is the version from Mistral, from that arc. And since his aura is kind of whitish silverish, so all of his condensers show silver. I think it is more of a chunky kind of unit at the beginning, but it does work quite a bit. And then I painted up the hilt to look more like his sword, the sword of Creation Mars. And then even more so painting up these, the big swords, which I believe story-wise within Gunpla Builders, they're based on the anti-ship swords from the Impulse, I believe. So they can be wielded separately or together, and I left the adapter on so that it would be easier to see what they are like when they are joined together. So that's a rather large weapon when they are together, and it represents the great sword mode that John has when he puts his sword into the shield and then uses them like that. And I chose to have both these on his back rather than using the 3 mini beam sabers that this comes with, because I thought that it would suit better and also allows him to use a heavier weapon whenever he wants to. Otherwise, his main weapon is just this beam saber, which some might underestimate, but I really like the effect part that comes with the Sinanju beam saber because it looks a lot more energetic and it's more unique. Then we have the shield, which of course has the arc symbol, and down here is would be the TR pattern. It was a challenge to paint, particularly with the Gundam Markers, because it's an uneven surface and you have that raised pattern underneath it with the sleeves logo. And then underneath we have a few more tricks that Jean can call upon. The 2 beam axes or beam tomahawks, I forget exactly what they were called, but this means that he has even more options available to him if he wants them, as if he gets more emotional, then he can take these and use them. With the high grade, in order to have these deployed, you would switch their position so that when you switch them around, you have the blades facing in the right direction. The other thing he's got here, which is strictly non-standard, but kind of at Nora's suggestion, grenade launcher. Because she said it would really pull the outfit together. I've included it here on the underside. So even though in canon, Jean does not have a ranged option, well, I've given him one. Whether or not he uses it, it's completely up to him. But for now, he does have a wicked looking shield that I think works quite well for him in this unit. It's something that really puts it all together, in my opinion. I mean, even though it doesn't have the option to mount a sword to it, well, he's got 2 axes and a great launcher. What more do you want? It's the perfect unit really to show that his potential is growing and he's growing into his role as leader, and he still has more potential yet to unlock. And I really like that about it. Even though Gunpla builders didn't really go far, well, Jean himself can go a bit further. The N in Juniper stands for Nora, and here we have the Laughter Gundam. I used the Val as the basis, as it's kind of threatening. The story behind it is a little bit deranged, I will admit. And you might think that the black part of it doesn't suit Nora, but she's got her own dark side as well. But in any case, I'll turn it in my hand. I was convinced building it that I had lost some armor parts because, well, this arm looks like that. It looks like it should have some armor on it. It really doesn't. It's that way. So, you build this, don't go looking for armor parts that just aren't there. Also, it's fairly easy for her to lose her double grip. Don't be too alarmed with that. But this is one of the units that has a hammer. And Nora has a hammer grenade launcher, so it fit. If only the back of the hand would fit back together. Yeah, there we go. But yes, she can two-hand with this. So the grenades would come out of the head here, which I have painted. It can't transform, of course, unfortunately, even though Magna Heal could. And you have the spikes for additional bludgeoning. This does go up a bit before it disconnects, but it disconnects rather readily. One thing that I don't really tend to like about the IBO kits is how easily some of the parts come off, but most especially the shoulders. That's something to caution you about if you're thinking about that. Otherwise, they're pretty good. You can position the thruster like that, or like that, for it to stay on. And I've never had that as an issue before. But this would be with her bomber jacket. I'll leave that off for now. And you'll notice there are extra spikes on the hammer, as well as spikes on the shield. Shield for extra defense, but also for shield bashing. And that's also where I put her personal logo. But because her semblance has to do with lightning, and these kind of remind me of the leads on a handheld taser. So these connect either on the hammer or the shield or both. She's going to deliver a significant shock to the target. And that just serves it better, in my opinion. So that is Nora's. I have, of course, changed the eye color from, I think it was red originally, because the voile belongs to a villain of a side story in Iron-Blooded Orphans. I've changed them to more of a Nora green. But she still has something of a threatening aspect because, well, she said she would be perfectly willing to break Cardin's legs, and that's distinctly un-Huntress behavior. But then again, she has an untraditional upbringing too. But after Gundam. And we have Pira's 8th unit. It's based upon the HGBF Argyaga, although without its original shields and without actually most of the weapons. The weapons that she is using, I think one of them is from, it might be from, oh wait, the shield is from the voile. I used, the handpiece is from maybe Hyper Gyanko, and the spear is Eastern weapons, if I'm remembering correctly. So this was a bigger repaint job, and I tried to fit the sash patterning onto the back of that big skirting. And then I converted the arms over from shields, use actually the powder powered arms in order to mount on one of the rifle bits for her gun, as well as this as an extension for her main weapon from sword mode to shield mode. And the arms are used here to simulate her polarity. But all the same, she is a fast and powerful unit. And there you can see I tried to put on her personal symbol of the spear and shield. And within the series itself, the Argyaga is a fairly powerful, fairly fast unit. There are just others that are much faster than it. But it has a lot of basis to be a good unit for Pira. And also, I'm not sure if you can see them, but I painted green onto the eyes on the sides there rather than using a mono eye. And of course, since she has kind of Greek or Athenian aesthetic in the show, she's painted with lots of gold and red to reflect all of that. So of course, the bare gray plastic represents stuff that she would leave basically bare, which is a lot on her. But I do believe that it gives her something of a regal look. And she does have versatility, she just doesn't have a whole lot of stopping power on her own. Unless, of course, she can bull rush something down. And I think for the most part she could. After all, she took on a number of students on her own, but that was on a match. When it comes to fighting bandits or Grimm, we have a bit less of an idea because of her exit from the show. But yeah, I put on some gold trim on the helmet and elsewhere just to keep up her image. So that's the Faith. Those have to go. The final unit of Team Juniper is also the trickiest to handle because of that big backpack, and I'm thinking of just getting rid of it. But there was a lot of painting going on here just to make it look the way Ren does. And you can see on the top there, I did like the pink streak on his hair, on his head as well. This, by the way, is the Nin Pulse from Build Fighters. And he does have a number of weapon aspects that he didn't have originally in the show, such as the staff that comes with it, with the Nin Pulse. But to simulate his Stormflower, we have these clear pieces that are mounted to the backs of his hands, and they can just go forward, like that. And he can shoot from them. The other aspect of this, of course, is that being that it's on his wrist, on the back of his wrist, he can't be disarmed of them unless he is literally disarmed. The Nin Pulse is fairly a fairly good build on its own. The only thing is that because of this big backpack, if you want it mounted on him like this in order to show the rest of him, well, you're going to have to deal with the weight. If you want to mount it onto the unit itself, I think you have to remove his head. And as bad as that might sound, now let's see. The stand is mounted up here, and then this itself, I think the ring of it is mounted to the backpack here. Really hard to see. Yeah. And then you have to get these petals out of the way of the head and out of the way of each other. Turn this around to make room for the head in the first place. And the way this has kind of fallen apart as I've been trying to do it kind of expresses the main issue that you might have, because it's so much. But, you know, it's also a giant shuriken, which is cool. But if you wanted to put it on the unit kind of as a poncho, you'd have to remove the head first. But also because ninja, and he might cover some stuff up. I forget if there's a certain way that it's supposed to face in order to go on. I'm pretty sure things are going to get in the way because there are a lot of projections going around. But hopefully you kind of get the idea even without the head back on. I think I'll just keep it separate for now, because this thing was very difficult to pose just as it was. So I would prefer for him to be posed just like this. It's very stable. It's very light without all of this on it. And you could I was going to say you could mount it onto a stand in order to have him using it, but that's peg. That's a peg. Oh, pretty sure you still could. I mean, like, it was on the stand originally. So you could go like this and have it beside him. And that's pretty cool too. But it's also pretty big. It's going to be big no matter what you do with it. It's a huge accessory. And you can have a lot of fun with it. But I just think I would display it more like this. Just separate from him. It's a good unit. And I think it can express Ren well. But he never really had all that much knockdown power. I'm looking at his arms and he has places to mount things, but he doesn't have anything to mount there, at least not right now. Also, you notice that the back of the hands have these spike things. I painted that myself. They don't come like that. So that's Team Juniper. I will get the next team prepared. Next I have Team Coffee. Just in case you didn't recognize them at first. And yes, getting Velvet's Scarlet Fever to stand is kind of an issue, which is why I have her crouched down the way I do. try to move it a bit away to see them better. There we go. So there you have a bit of an OP power drive, I think. And as you can see, well, it's also a bit interesting. So we have, I probably did give them names, but I don't remember at the moment what they were. I will, I think, stop these before they start to fall over and start to talk about what they are. So, of course, I should start with Coco first. She is the team leader. Will you stand, or at least sit up straight? This can go there. So Coco Adele's unit is based off of the Mao X. And that dropped off of... Oh. Did it just come off of its main mounting? I wasn't expecting that. But I guess it can just sort of do that. And you can see her crosshair symbol on the back of the wing for her satellite cannon. Because, yes, Coco, while being able to rip apart Grimm with the fire of her Gatling gun, which I kind of forget the name of, other than that, she doesn't end up having a whole lot of stopping power, unfortunately. So I gave her more stopping power by giving her a supremely powerful cannon. As well, there's this which I think this Gatling gun is part of an expansion kit that Bandai made, but I'm not sure anymore at this point. There's also one by Kotobukiya, but I could, if I wanted to... Oh, you can take off the barrel and make it smaller. But I'm not sure about anything else, but the other one you could take stuff off, and then it could be basically in purse mode. I'm pretty sure this would come off, and then maybe the back. But for now, let's play with it in full mode, because that's when Coco seems to be at her utmost. Though not necessarily at her most impressive, because she was able to thwack around some fairly sized Grimm with the bag in bag mode rather than just in this, but that also proved it's the same weight, which is considerable whether or not it's deployed. And this one, of course, I had to give her some trendy thigh highs. All of the energy patterns are gold for this. She does have a more standard beam saber hilt under here. You can see that, as well as the beam saber attached here to the back of the cannon. She does have some suit-mounted submachine guns and these smaller shield platings. And of course, well, also a missile launcher there. Show that there could be one under here too. And the main part of the X line, the satellite cannon, and the panels to open those up. I did once try to paint one of these and it did not turn out well. Therefore, I went over to the stickers, which, since they're so long, if you don't put them on aligned correctly, they don't look good, and they can wrinkle easily, as you can see. But if the machine gun, if this Gatling gun isn't enough, she can always open up these panels deploy her gun here, the satellite cannon, and completely wreck house. Oh, she can still use this anyway, but it is an additional option that she has. And I do believe this is one of the shorter units, the X units. So that's a lot of power placed into a slightly smaller unit, which has 2 sights for some reason on this cannon. But, you know, it's there, and as she has a powerful personality, it kind of suits her. And yeah, as an additional detail, you'll notice that I painted the eyes in black, symbolizing her shades, which are her favorite shades. So, you know, why not? I thought that was a fairly good turn for that. So that is, I believe I actually called it the Crosshair Gundam. Because crosshair. Get it? I'm just going to put that off to the side now and not on the ground. And I'll carry them back when I'm done with them. F in coffee stands for Fox Alistair. Funny story. This one is made purely out of leftover parts from a custom that I had made for Akazuki, Mikazuki's son at the end of Iron-Blooded Orphans, which I thought to make out of the best parts out of the Barbatos Lupus and Barbatos Lupus Rex. Meaning that even though these are leftover parts, they still, I believe, are effective in what they do. Fox Alistair is a blind huntsman. He does have a sense of humor in the book that I read, which I think was Before the Fall. And he can be rather brutal with his tonfa. So the Barbatos is something that is fairly suited to him. And of course, if you turn around the waist, you can kind of put it into a beast mode. The tonfas themselves, of course, are from the Gunblade Lance, not from this or any other unit. And I just used some spare joint parts so that you can use them either in this mode or forward piercing, as he did do that in the show. Because I mounted it to the hinge armor, I didn't manage to drill a hole into the door that the pegs would fit. They do come off, but what doesn't come off on the Gunpla, right? But they can face forward like this, and then he can pierce and inject his aura and disrupt a Grim or other. And as you can see in the eyes, they are silver to indicate his vision impairment, but he still is an extremely effective hunter, or huntsman. Also, are these more the clawed hands or more the normal ones? I don't think these have the clawed hands, but these have the clawed feet and the bigger thrusters. Alistair has more of a casual aspect to him, and of course the subarms are in here, but he doesn't really have all that much use for the subarms themselves. The main reason why he has these arms, other than just an attaching point, they're longer, which gives him longer reach. So he's able to reach his opponents, his targets, a lot more easily than if I was to give him the Lupus's arms. So that is Alistair's swift striking Gundam. Kind of looks a bit demonic, but hey, that's also him. I'll put that to the side. Yatsuhashi is last. Here's the bunny girl. Velvet Scarlatina. It's one of the fan favorite characters because of the way she acted and also the way she looked. And at the time when I wanted to reflect she was a faunus, there was only one place that I could get the bunny ears. And that was with the Titans version of the Super Femina and that's what that is. So that's why her armor still reflects that. And I had to do some considerable painting in order to get closer to her battle outfit, which was the result of a fan competition, I believe, just recolored from what the fan originally did. So too with the eyes, I did do my best at painting them on top of the sticker, mind you. And the hair, which was an inspiration for being able to do the same with Zentrea's hair, I added this kind of to be like a staff, a caster's staff, because she doesn't have an offensive weapon of her own within the show, but she does have her camera, which, spoilers, allows her to copy weapons. It doesn't allow her to copy semblances or really fighting styles, but she can copy fighting styles herself. So this part would be the camera part, and then this would be the storage part. The downfall of doing this is I lost one of the pegs. Or did I cover that? The peg hole. She can still be mounted onto a stand, but it's a bit tricky. Still, it can be done. So, as you can kind of see, I glued this on there, snapped off the peg to do that. I think it's actually kind of tricky. I don't really recall. No, wait. So with the Super Femina, now I'm remembering. There was a peg here. There was also a peg here, so I had to cut them, and I tried to cut them so that they would help connect into the arm. But the arm shape is convex, I believe. So that was pretty tough for me. In the end, it connects more on the top and bottom than it does in the middle, and it was very tricky to mount that. On the other hand, the beam saber here got stuck and broke off. So that's the thing that happened. But other than that, I think the Scarlet Fever accurately reflects Velvet in as much as I possibly could. And I think that she looks cute. Also, her symbol, the stitched heart, is over here. So that is her, and I will put her down beside as we get to Yatsuhashi. And this is indeed as close as I could get to him two-hand holding his main weapon. This is using the HGBF Sengoku Astray, which I thought was pretty reasonable considering he has a Japanese aspect anyway. I know that he only has one side of this on, but it didn't make sense to take away one side and just leave him with the other. So he has both. In point and fact, the Astray is something of a unique build in the high grade. It can be a little tricky, but it is also very interesting. With the Sengoku Astray, it focuses on speed features like big bell thrusters, and melee. So it does come with the 2 swords here, as well as the shield backpack, which I have painted more in Yatsuhashi's colors. The eye thruster emitters and the mouth aren't painted like that. I believe it's all solid red, so everything there that isn't red is something that I painted. Yatsuhashi is this big guy, and he also serves as team tank. He is very powerful, very strong, but also gets overwhelmed by fast things pretty easily. The sword, on the other hand, besides being able to conduct the aura, it seems to have emitters on both sides, so he can fire things as well. And because the Sengoku Stray could transmit energy out, he's not limited to short range. But if things become dire or direr, and he needs to use more weapons, he does have these katana, which one of them I believe is based on, or it might not be based on the Gabara Strait anymore. But besides that, he does have the 2 sub-arms, which can be deployed, and they can carry, I believe they can carry the swords. Aren't they supposed to? Well, you can kind of put them in, or you can... maybe attach them with this. Either way, he does have those as options so that he can use them when the situation changes. He's fairly versatile and powerful. Makes for a pretty good tank. I thought that bringing out more green like that would reflect him well, and you can see the centerpiece is the darker green because my metallic green starts that way and then it turns shiny afterwards. So his standard green is kind of more dull, and he also has brown there, as you can see on his chest. So I think that goes rather well with him. And of course I painted gold on different things in order to further enhance the look. Now on to the next team. There was already another team. Okay. going before they fall over, shall we? Can you guess who this one is? Oops. And of course, one of them has already fallen over. Of course, it can be tricky to get them posed. And further together, especially if they're as large as some of these guys are. And as if that wasn't enough, well, you've got 2 units here that are essentially leftover units from other customs that I had made, and then I got the 2 others to fill in the blanks. This is Team Sun. So we have the Crossfire Gundam. We have oh, the other one, Burning Sun. What would this be? Monkey's Pride, perhaps. And we have Neptune's Surefire and the Wisdom. Let's just call it. It's Iono Sage. I'll give you a good chance to see these guys as they rotate around. We don't see too much of them in the show itself. And that we see, well, let's be honest, not all that impressive, is it? So, when we come around back to it, actually, I don't have to wait, do I? Let me just pull them off. So first off is Sun's unit. And with his, of course, I had to try to recreate his weapon in both modes. So these both come from weapon expansion kits. I forget if they're Eastern Weapon or something else. I think they're IBO ones, actually. And those are numbered rather than named. So the staff part also came with the axe blade that Neptune is using. But of course I didn't use it here. And then the chain here that I used came from another part that was to connect to a mace. And I used 2 spare beam saber blades and painted them in order to make the nunchaku. And of course, Sun's unit combines different aspects of the 00 Gundam and the Kamiki burning. So just in case you wondered what the waist, what the arms and shoulders are from, what the feet are from, that's it. And this is basically a leftover unit from my own Sonata Scherzo, which I use as my avatar. So when you have leftovers, do try to use them for something rather than just throwing them out. But that's what this is. It's leftovers well used, I guess you could say. So I tried to make the best use of it I possibly could. Of course, the articulation on this is going to be great because the base unit it's based on is great. And he can kind of monkey around because he has the weapon in 2 modes rather than just the one. But then again, within canon, it would be able to split those into 2 and use them, whereas he has them joined here. This is actually 2 of this. Or it would be if I could paint them accurately, but I couldn't. But that is Sun's. And I think that it does it fairly well. It's kind of jeans and open vest. It's basically all he wears. It's pretty basic. That's why I didn't have to paint all that much on him. And his aura is golden, so he has golden condensers. When it comes to Team Sun, I never know which S to go with next, so I'll just move on to whichever one is closest, which is Scarlet David. And he's the other leftover unit when I was making my Rhapsody Gundam with all of the firepower and armor on it. This is what was left over. And he still has significant firepower, and he actually has 2 of these around. One of them I think is from the cross. Oh, it's from the weapon expansion kit. That the sword and the pistol came with, and the hooks. I think this came with that. Oh, maybe not. These are pearlescent, I think. So this might have come with the Crossbone X1 full cloth. And of course I painted the sword, got the pistol, the hooks are up here where the beam sabers would be. So you can see a lot of pearlescence on this because I decided not to use the pearlescence on the Rhapsody. The Rhapsody, which I painted silver and green all over the place, basically. So it definitely would have covered up that plastic, and I have no idea how it would have reacted because it's a different quality of plastic than the standard. But this gives Scarlet his sword and his grappling pistol, which he used in the short match. And of course I painted part of the head red to symbolize his hair. And the parts of the armor that he got show how flamboyant he tends to be. So that is Scarlet's unit. It's still fairly powerful. Even though it doesn't appear to have a lot, it still has quite a bit. And he still has 2 beam sabers that he can call on there. So yeah, that's him. And that is, just in case you didn't notice it, again, one of the smaller units. If we take Sun's beside it, is basically head and shoulders taller. And so that brings us to the other S in the team, Sage. This poor Helmwig Rin car didn't have a lot to do in Iron-Blooded Orphans, and neither did Sage. So it kind of makes it appropriate that I made this choice for which unit to use for him. And I tried to paint it up as closely as I could to Sage, his hair, the way he wears his armor and his sleeves, and of course his sword, which is the biggest part of it. And the way it has numerals on it makes me think that his semblance has something to do with time, and the fact that he's somewhat linked as Sage to the Aesop tail and the owl. So he has wings on the back, he has some wings on his chest, and he has a massive sword with which to hit, and the smaller mace, but he can actually fight close up and faster than he would normally with just the massive sword. I hope. And I did have hopes that we could see more of the teams that we met. And we haven't until now, but hopefully we can later. So a massive sword as the centerpiece for this unit, because we don't see a whole lot else of them. So that's Sage Iono's unit, and as you can see, as an IBO unit, there are places where it doesn't have a whole lot of armor. As a reminder too, that the Helmwig is armor on top of the Grimguard, and the Grimguard is one of my favorite units certainly my favorite units that came out of Iron-Blooded Orphans. There you go, is Sage. And he is kind of heavy to one side because of the sword. And of course you have the issues with the shoulders popping off all the time. And if I could get him standing, I could leave him alone long enough to talk about Neptune. So with Neptune, I used the Keradim Heavy Weapons version and the Trans Am version, so I didn't have to repaint it, as Neptune wears quite a bit of red. He is something of a sniper, although with the Axe Blade, of course, he can use it as close range as well. Thing is, though, that I couldn't come up with another option for his halberd, so that is what I did. I basically cut it off, painted it onto the Keradim's rifle, and then painted the GN axe pistol's blades, and that's basically it. And added some blue around for the aura driver to make it kind of next gen. And of course he also has the shield bits. He can be quite defensive. And his anchor symbol on the back there. And it's basically pretty straightforward. That's basically what he is. I do like the feathers in the cap on the side of the Keradim, and it also kind of shows how showy Neptune can be too. And it's kind of suitable that he has a lock-on Stratos unit, because so is he. So that is Team Sun. Let's go back to standby, and I will get the next team. Oh, I wouldn't be able to describe that as very fun. Uh-oh. My wire got caught in the whole tangle. I can't say that is very expected either. And it keeps on getting caught. These guys just have big stuff. Unfortunately. But this is Team Stark. And I did have some fun coming up with these. Some of them by accidents too. I think we have to hold that out of the way. Otherwise they're going to keep on getting tangled on things. And they keep on colliding with the wall too. Unless of course I was to move that out of the way. And I mean, you can't get that much, too much bigger. And actually, that was being held on. So let's talk about them first, shall we? Before more fall over, as I'm sure they were about to. No teams. I think I have to put you to the side of it. Oops. Lost some of the stand, which would have made him harder to stand up. Let's start up with Summer Rose Hero Bar. And in case you missed the theme naming, yes, I did name it with the same sense as I did RWBY's Akabar. Because I wanted to follow the theming that was already established. But why Shiro and not Kuro? Well, even though Summer wears mainly black, her cape is white, and that's what she's mostly remembered for. But I only came upon this sort of combination by accident. And this started when I said to myself, I wonder what would happen if I gave one of the fastest IBO suits the fastest Gundam Seed wings. It was basically the entire Genesis. And so I took the wings off of the Freedom, the HGCE Freedom, gave them to the HG Grimguard, and then I started to wonder, how should I paint it? The paint jobs on both, by default, are almost completely opposite. The Grimguard is red, kind of like a char suit, and this was blue. So, it took some time before I thought, well, I could make this summer suit, because I had already started on the RWBY Gunpla Project, and it just sort of fit. But when I thought about Summer, I realized we know basically nothing about her weapons and her fighting style. We only know that she was a great inspiration for RWBY. And they look basically the same. Their fighting styles are probably at least a little bit similar. But RWBY learned how to fight from pros, so what about Summer? She could basically have anything, right? So she has basically everything in this. She has 2 short swords that are mounted to the 2 little shields that she has, which has additional shield generators, kind of like eye field things on them. She has the Zeta Gundam's Mega High Beam Launcher. She has a Zaku type of submachine gun, the Tommy gun. No Vulcan cannons though, but the rest she has a lot. And of course, on the Freedom Wings, she has the shoulder mounting railguns. So she has a heck of a lot of power, a heck of a lot of speed, balanced defense, and good short range combat with the swords. So she's an all-around great unit. Shame then that Summer will never get to use this, seeing as how she has passed before the start of the season even begins. But I do like the aesthetics of this, that we have the copper underneath the cape. We have red lining all over the suit, so it's not entirely black, and some purple highlights all over the place, as well as gold eye in the main and silver eye underneath, I believe. So because we already knew she was a silver-eyed warrior, I kind of reflected that too. And yes, I did paint the other side of the thrusters, and what would have been the Ahab reactor originally is of course an aura driver here. So very fast, very powerful. Oh, and this can detach, just not from the mounting. Because of the way I had to do this, I had to glue this adapter on so that the wings wouldn't swivel all the time. Because that's an issue. The T in Stark stands for Taiyang. And even though he's a fisty guy, we also know that he's an instructor. So based on that, I decided that he would be able to fight with a little bit of everything. Therefore, I came up with the idea that his unit would be based upon the Exia R2. R2 because, well, he's already seen a lot of stuff. There are areas of his life from which that he would have had to recover and repair in order to be a functioning person, one of them being the losses of Summer and Raven in his life. And so he has come back to combat, being fully capable to take on enemies with a variety of weapons and even a shield that can project energy in order to fully participate in battle. This is quite the powerful unit, though it remains unnamed for him. But of course he does what he can. So here you can see on his shoulder, I tried to do his shoulder tattoo symbol, and then I also put it on the shield. He has some dull coloring, but also some warm coloring. And if you're wondering why some stuff appears kind of scuff on the shoulders, it's because I mixed up which one was which originally and had to paint over. But I think it still looks fairly okay. And of course he's got his cargo shorts painted on, because that's the way he is. But it is still a fairly light unit, even though it's got all of these weapons. The sword comes from the amazing Exia. I gave one to one of my nephews, and he decided not to use it, so I have it there. And that's why he has that. So that is Ty's unit, which for Team Stark just leaves Raven. And Raven is in denial. That is to say, the denial Gundam. Hold on to your blade if you would, Ty. So as you saw earlier, I used the denial's head and arm for Yang's unit. Therefore, this has the Tri-Burning's head and its arm. So now Raven gets to carry a little bit of Yang with her after their talk in the vault. But the Denial Gundam has more of a menacing aura than the Burning series. So I thought it fit Raven's image rather well. And on top of that, her clothes and aura have kind of a samurai feel. So I thought that worked pretty well for her. Another option, of course, for her would have been Gundam Vidar from Iron-Blooded Orphans because of the way Raven's sword works. And in that, she has multiple replacement dust-based blades that she can draw from a sheath over and over again, basically until she runs out, although I have no idea if she has ever run out. That's kind of a question. I seriously have no idea if she ever has. If the coloring on the sword looks a little bit familiar, and it likely should, that's because I originally gave it to Velvet, as I thought that she could make use of a sword in her martial arts. She is a martial arts master. She's able to copy multiple techniques as she does weapons, and this would give her fairly versatile options. But then I thought, well, she's more of a caster type, and I could give this sword to Raven instead, so that's what I did. This version, of course, has the blade and arm that I don't have on Ying. So she has the blade here, but it is unpainted, so leaving that the sparkly purple, which, despite the fact that this is supposed to be a threatening unit, I kind of think that it's cool that it's sparkly and purple. It just works. So a fairly fast, fairly powerful unit. I think it works really well for Raven in her image. And also it gives her wings. I'm not sure if I used them on the wrong side, but it is what it is. It appears kind of loose, so I don't really want to play with it too much. It'll just get looser. On to the next. So say goodbye for now. We will be back. My apologies, I completely had skipped a member of Team Stark, and I really should not have. He's kind of hard to get to, but here he is. This is Rose unit. Corvid, and unlike Ravens, he does have the ability to transform. This is... my goodness, what was it called again? It's not, is it Zephyros? Something like that? But it's a custom from the Build Divers side story. And it happens to be based on Lacan's Alia's final unit. And I've actually got a lot of Keros in it as well. Oh, Harte was the original unit. So, It is rather large. Pretty much everything for the transformation is right on the back. And on top of that, can be completely detached from it. Which I thought is kind of funny, but also kind of tragic. Because without it, well, what else do you have? But we can take a look at it separately. So it is kind of spindly without it. It looks almost emaciated, but that's the way that it is. So I used the new head, the old chest though, so that it can pop out and cover up the head when it transforms. These are the new skirt pieces, which aren't as long, but they are still going to pop out because, of course, they will pop out. This came with clear blue pieces for those, and these can pop out for the sights. This is in sword mode, and of course they can open up and scissor those together. So you can see that it uses this handle in its rifle mode, and although these can pop up, I don't remember whether or not it had a sticker, but I wouldn't have used it anyway. In sword mode, it uses this part of the handle, and the sight is recessed in. I did paint the eyes, and the face is also unique to this one. Arte has a visor as well that goes on this head. It would not fit on this, so I did not use it. On its own, the articulation on this is fairly good. However, when you add the backup pack, there's a lot that gets added on there. I think, yeah, the drive is over there. It's between the legs, which at this point is almost to be expected of a 00 light type. Oh, the chest pieces is also different on this one, and it was on the original Harite. At the same time, I'm going to remove this for a bit because it has the thing where you can remove part of the hand cover and move it slightly so that it has more of an open state, and then it uncovers the GN submachine gun. However, it's not really molded in. As you can see, I just kind of used my panel liner to get underneath, and it would go into the notches that are shorter, that's more forward, and just like that. You can barely see it though. It's one of those occasions where I don't think Bandai put in that much work or consideration into it, and it's a carryover from the Harite anyway, so not really that much in that. As for what was on the backpack, these are all of the transformation stuff on it. I think this piece might be new, and I've colored it. Most of it is just this. That's the flight mode. Just like that. It kind of looks cool, kind of not though, because there's something missing from there, and that's the rest of the mobile suit. But at the same time, that's most of it there. It does have the tank cannons here, which also can be used as guns. And, of course, if you turn these around this way, then this is the tank mode. The one thing that this is missing as well, the swords guns can attach to this side. And then it's was that the part of the vehicle mode? This is still in. Well, that's kind of silly having that way. Still, it's kind of silly having something that can transform into a ship or a fighter still be able to transform into a tank as well. But then again, you know, one of the cool things of the final form for Optimus Primal in Beast Wars was he could do a tank and a plane too. So that's what this can do separate. It is very big, very beefy, very weighty, which is a huge part of the reason why it gets in the way of this thing's ability to stand. The feet themselves aren't all that big. So when you add this on, I'm assuming this is the right way up at this point. When you add this on, of course, it's going to fall down. Without the stand, it can't help it. If I was to demonstrate just the way this integrates with the suit itself, the shoulder part comes up. The chest piece for this thing actually, the original one doesn't come out, or the new one doesn't come out. This one does, so it can cover up like that. And then, of course, for the transformation, the shoulders would come up, the arms would come down, this would turn, and then it would go onto its stomach like that. So imagine that more kind of like that, kind of really not. You have to point the feet and turn them. Well, you kind of get the idea. But being that a crow can turn into a crow, I thought it would be appropriate to use a transforming one, and this one in particular already has a color scheme that's close to crows, so it just kind of fit. The only things that I changed were the eyes, and I painted like a pattern so that it could match his cape a bit more closely. If I didn't know any better, I'd think that RWBY got the cape thing from Crow, but we also know that Summer wore one. So that is Crow, and I will set him back very quickly and move on to the next. So these guys aren't necessarily teams. I forgot what this. It's a little bit of this. I'll go through them, I suppose, one by one. First up, we will have General Ironwood's unit. And as it's based, I use the GBN base Gundam. So we have quite a bit of basic kind of armaments. And you might be thinking, wait, but Ironwood, isn't he a bad guy? He is now, but he didn't used to be. And this is more based on as he was when he was basically during Volume 4, is basically what he's wearing currently in this one. And I figured that basic equipment would do him pretty much. And his weapons are beefed up pistols, so it just kind of fit. I did let him keep the shield for additional defense, even though he doesn't really do anything defensively when he fights that we have seen. Even in the more recent episodes, he just sort of fights it out. He musters through whatever he's facing. And so, looking kind of like a more modernized version of the RX-7802, kind of like the OG, and yet kind of not as well. No, that's what I was going for when I chose this to do Ironwood's custom. And you can see one of his pistols is light colored, the other is mostly dark. So they are definitely the custom pieces that his weapons are in the show. And he has some basic military colors as well, because that's the way he was. You'll notice that the thrusters are glued on backwards. This is because they are GN drive emitters. And on the outside, because even though they're fairly small, they are still too large to be internal. So he does have the power provided by my OC, who would have made these within the series, as a supporter of the cause against Salem. Is a thing with these, I wonder. Oh yeah. So I guess these are more shotgun parts. When you take them off, you end up with this as his pistol, which still is pretty good. And I think it's kind of fun having this giant mech armed with pistols. It's just a kind of cool concept. So he does have the beam sabers, a GN type drive, the aura driver as well. He does have the basic shield here. So, more basic armaments, but still very strong, especially in his hands, because he is such a strong warrior. He doesn't need anything more. And I wouldn't have been able to talk about Ironwood without also talking about his second in command. This is Winter Schnee's unit. And it's mostly 00 Sky. So with a bit of no wait, that's not the 00 Sky, it's the 00 Diver. With a bit of a difference, it does have the wing parts from the G Portent. In order to get these to be able to mount, I had to cut and glue the different parts together, so it's actually mounted using the 00's mounting that's glued onto here. So like you can kind of see after the part where it's painted, it's a different piece. And these were originally on another unit that I was using, so it's painted a bit differently than the rest of the unit, but you still got some purple in here. And so on her older costumes, there was a lot of silver or white. So she's got armored boots that go all the way up here. She's got a whole bunch of condensers. And the fun thing with this unit is that a bunch of the parts come in clear. So you can paint those. It also comes with the basic color stuff. I think these are the basic ones. What I used originally were those clear parts. So, kind of interesting there. While Winter is normally calm, cool, and collected, there are certain things and certain people that can push her buttons. One of those is Crow. And for taking him on, other than her basic swords, the GN Sword 2s, she does have the no-name rifle adapted to her. So you can see the way that it's colored. And it can, a bunch of its parts do fold out and expand in order to make it more viable weapon. It is, rifle is in the name, but it's also a bladed weapon that can deploy in all sorts of ways, including in nitro mode, so whenever winter gets heated, well, this thing can activate and be a whole bunch of trouble for her opponents, including sometimes Crow. So that is option that I packed in for her. And as opposed to getting the entire No Name Astray, I just got the rifle as an expansion pack. Because I thought they were better things than the Astray. Let's see. Fold back this way. I think it does. It's kind of hard to track where things are supposed to go. And I did try to mount it onto the Gundam itself, but it just wouldn't do. So I just put it into the hand and left it there. So that's closed position. And then, oops, I have to put the hand to the side like that. This will go into there, and then she'll hold it just like this. So that's how that is. Oh, and the scope goes out to the side. This is the rifle part. Up. But because it's all on one side, so is all the weight. So it can be a bit too pose. Anyway, the last of this set is for Penny, and this one can have a lot of things falling off because there is a lot to it. In fact, all the funnels do a lot. As we know, Penny has a lot of things to it, and so I thought the only unit that would fit her was the Age FX Burst version. So she's got that big heavy rifle, she's got beams coming out all over the place, including on the wrist. And hopefully you can see the way I've changed the colors for it in order to match more closely what she wears in her first appearances. Of course, I made this before she reappeared in Volume 7 and missed her very much. Now, I'm not going to fool around too much with this because there's so much that can fall off. Only to say that besides all of this, well, you can pull apart the rifle to be a bit smaller. There's also a core fighter that comes on this, and you can see the back of that there. So it's a pretty interesting unit. There is a lot to it. You can display it with all the funnels out like this on the stand. The stand is quite expansive. It has storage areas for the extra hands too, which I think is pretty cool. But when you have everything on like that, there's not a whole lot you can do to pose. And sometimes you might find yourself mixing up which beam part goes where because there's so many. But there being so many is the reason why I chose this unit, the HFX Burst, to represent Polydina. And I try to get as much of her colors onto it because otherwise you don't know that that's supposed to represent her. But, you know, all the green, the stripes and power lines, you've got under her feet as well, the thigh highs and the little symbol thing on the back, way back in there, between on the middle of the back skirt. That's Penny. So now we will go to the next set. And I'm sorry, I didn't realize originally that when I go to standby, it has its own music. but I paused it the last time. I thought I would continue, and we would go with someone who is further connected from others, but who I wanted to get a model of. Anyway, this is Neapolitan's one, and I could think of no better model than this one. This is the Super Femina Axis Angel version. And as you can see, I painted up the feet, the legs, a whole bunch of stuff in the chest as well, in Neapolitan colors, and even changed the colors on the wingtips where I thought they would more precisely match, well, her umbrella paint, or parasol paint. And as a bit of a twist, I did add the cat ears from the Titans version, because she does behave kind of catty. But otherwise, yeah, Neo colors. There really weren't any other models I thought that could make like her umbrella in its deployed form. And so that's why I chose this one to represent her. And while the umbrella itself, when it's open, is lacy, and it has all these colors around it, this was the best I could think of to do, also because when she takes her wings, her umbrella down, they're going to turn into wings. So I thought they may as well look functional in both forms. But I also wanted to be able to show how I did her hair and her face, as well as her eyes, because her eyes are different colors in the shows. Not only is she able to change her eyes, but as far as we know, these are more of her natural colors. So as they're mismatched in her hair, I also did the inside of the cat ears the same way. And even the parts of her armor, all the way around, are mismatched because of that. The only part that I dislike because of the risk is up here, because that's a softer plastic. Anytime I turn the waist, that scratches the plastic. But otherwise, this, despite being a Super Femina, is one of my favorite customs. Because it's Neo, and because the way I was able to bring out the Paracel of Pain is just so interesting to me. Because it's probably one of the most unique ways to bring about this sort of image. And she has this umbrella, and she's kind of cheeky with it too. That's the way I decided to do it. Put her aside here as we go towards the last three who are here. And I do kind of want to put them up on the same time because they are related. But they are not a team. I will set them like that, bring my camera back, and there we go. We have a unit for Oz, for Ozpin, though not Ozma. We have one for Oscar Pine, as he decided to become a Huntsman, and we have one for Glinda Goodwich. I will let that rotate as I begin to talk about them. As for Ozpin, because of his rather obvious connection being one of the OG, I thought there would be no unit more appropriate to use than the O Gundam. I have a whole bunch of O units within the RWBY Gundam Gunpla Project. So it made sense that the first one, the one to inspire them all and hold them all up, would be based on the O Gundam. So here we have him with the particle unit in, and as Professor Ozpin wore mostly black, well, that's the way he appears here. And when it came to making his cane, well, that I had some issues with, as you will see. So, you take a closer look at Oz. Of course, he's got the black and the green. One thing I didn't realize about the O Gundam, it still has the circular piece that the later O units have. But it looks significantly, very significantly, like the RX-7802, as well as a bit of the later ones. It does have the prototype shield in hand, as well as mounted there. That's the way it goes. And the thing you'll notice most here is the cane. So with the cane, I did want to make it so that it could be deployed. So this is the handle that came with the O Gundam, and then I wanted to use some minus bevel parts. These are MSG from Kotobukiya. This is part of an Abio mace unit that I'm using as the actual stick part, and the handle part is part of a runner. So I just cut that off and glued it on, and then I jammed in this, and then I found it was stuck. So that was the issue with the game. It's always going to be deployed from here on out. And that's basically just it. So I can't put it back onto the back where it would mount here, but that would be something he'd be able to do if he was using this thing. And I do think that it's possible that Oz and Oscar would become separated from body control later on in the series. It's just not something that's happening currently. Speaking of Oscar, because his origin is as a farm boy, sort of like Luke Skywalker, I thought that the ground Gundam S-type from Thunderbolt would be appropriate to him. You can kind of see the Thunderbolt in the feet, kind of like the Atlas, and in the crazy backpack. So it's something of a basic design. It's a GM Gundam mashup, and it's got a lot of oranges and greens, just like Oscar would have. I tried to do the cross belts that were in his Huntsman kind of outfit, and the cross at the back is a sticker. Probably it would go on the shield. There is also one that would go on the forehead, but it's definitely not this one because this is white and so is the forehead. And one of the funny things is that with the appearance of the plastic here, it's like one of the rubbery covers that are on some of the other suits, so they're recreated better on a master grade, like the full armor Gundam. They still have the appearance here of that. So he has a pike as his basic weapon. It's kind of like the staff, and it can be used as part of the stick, and it can be used as such fairly easily. All of this here comes in the clear pink that you see. If you want to make it look more like a staff, you have to paint it kind of like I have. And you have to be careful with this tip part because the peg isn't all that robust. So I try to be careful with this. He does have a few extra tricks on him. It looks like this should separate into a beam saber. I don't think it does. But he does have a pair of beam sabers mounted to the back here on the arms. And it does have the appearance of having 3 more arms here. And 2 arms deployed that can handle 2 more weapons, such as the assault rifle and shields. So the shields can also mount to the arms, as you can see the mounting here. And that's how I have this shield mounted. And it is, of course, a Gundam style shield. Just as if with the others, when I have the verniers, I reverse the way they're on and glue them on so that they're more like GN drives. So that is Oscar. A Ground Gundam because he's more grounded. So I thought it was appropriate, as he is now a Huntsman. Then we come, finally, to Glinda Goodwich's Diadem Gundam. And yes, I did name it that based on the fact that her emblem is a diadem, or a crown. And in fact, when you take this and put it together, you get her diadem emblem. Or at least that's what I tried to do. Of course, this is where those other bits, the parts that I used on the back of Winter's unit, came from. And I had to do the same thing with this. I had to snip off the connectors, glue them together, wait for them to set before I could put these on the back of here in order to have them mounted strongly. So, of course, with Glinda, she has telekinesis and almost appears like magic. Her aura seemed to be purple, so I painted the stuff purple. And she does have the Pierce sword instead. I didn't include the rifle that came with the G-port, and because I thought that this would be more appropriate. And she can more powerfully manipulate things with this. I did cut off the antennae that were here on the clavicles, and did the rest of the painting in keeping with what we saw on screen of her, including the gold-colored heels, which I always thought were kind of funny. And you'll notice too that she has a pair of beam saber hilts back here, which I have painted black so they're more like her wand. But instead she has two of them. I removed the rear unit so that she doesn't have it, because those only contained repair carols, and if she has her telekinesis, she doesn't really need them, so it slims down the unit overall. Finally, she has not one, not two, but 3 aura drives, making her one of the most powerful units out there. And it's the more compacted type that are found on the 00 Diver. So that's the last of the units that I have currently. I do want to do the twins, and for that I've got the Amazing Exia in the Exia Dark Matter. I want to be able to use the tonfas for the skirting that they have, and see how that goes. I do have us to almost 2 hours 45 minutes, so I think I'll continue on with some other models that I have, but they are going to be a little bit different from here on in. So we have checked that that's that, and I will bring out the next models, which will not be Gunpla, but I did say that I may try to go on do some other stuff. So let's bring out the Star Trek ships. Oh, but before we focus on these guys, I thought it appropriate to also talk about this because we did the RWBY thing. So this is volume 2 of the official manga, which I got from the library. And I do think that they went up a level or two as far as the writing goes. The art style is pretty much the same, but I think that Glinda Kinami handled the story better here than he did in volume 1, and it's more its own thing, and it's more streamlined than in the show, and a lot of ways better written. And you can see that the art is consistent here with the characters and getting to meet more characters in different ways. Most especially, my favorite part of this was RWBY bumping into Penny, and I think this is a more realistic way that this might have happened than what we see in the show, because knowing Penny's nature, who and what she is, it's more realistic for her to be the one to be standing and for RWBY to be on her butt, and then for Penny to respond this way. So that was part that I really enjoyed. But so this manga covers from a minor incident, then we're moving towards Blake's arc and the argument about the White Fang that they had, and of course the encounter with Penny as they're chasing Sun, and it goes all the way past the battle with Roman in the Paladin, until we meet Neo as well. And that's basically as far as the second one goes, but that's a pretty fair distance. And then it ends with Cinder Emerald and Mercury going to the school. But I do think that it's a pretty good volume. I think that it's the best so far. I haven't read the rest, and I do recommend it. Whether or not you're familiar with this story, although chances are you are, you will probably enjoy this. And so I do recommend that. And that's the end of my mini review of RWBY Volume 2 official manga. Now, let's get on to the ships, shall we? And I do want to feature the ones that are related as they are. I should give more of a top-down look. Now that we don't have to deal with the standing models, we can give you a different kind of view. So we'll start off with these, and I'm trying to do the ones that are more related to each other and see how we proceed. So the first one that we can look up is the Micro Machine Miranda class USS Reliant, NCC 1864. And even though it's an old collectible toy, it is fairly detailed. And they did a fairly good job of it. I feel quite connected to this one because it is one of my first Star Trek Micro Machines I ever got. And even though the hull is blue, it still looks very good. And someone once wrote in a comment in someone else's video that the Miranda class is basically a hatchback version of the Constitution class. And I just can't get that in my head because, hey, it's kind of mostly right. In fact, it might be right all the way. This isn't a Connie, but it's pretty close. It's one of my custom ships from Star Trek Online, but the components are all here, and this is based on the Connie refit, which, so is this, by the way. So you've got the saucer, and by the way, these are almost the same scale too. So you've got the saucer, you've got the nacelles, smaller struts for this. What's missing here is the secondary hull with the deflector array. But otherwise, yeah, this is a smaller, more affordable version of the Connie, the Constitution class, which is why I bring this in. On top of which, the Reliant, of course, was the ship Khan was using, and the one that did quite a bit of damage to the Enterprise NCC 1701A featured within those movies. With the Miranda class, there is a basic configuration, but there's also some customizability. This one has the tactical pod up here that you can see. So there are some that don't have anything there at all. There are additional sensors, even additional warp drives, and some cannons. And some of those get called a different class, but it's still a Miranda base. And this was new way back when they were coming out in the movies. And I always thought sometimes they could fly around like this too. And it's a more standard type of variation, but it still looks very Star Trek, still looks very Starfleet because it's the same ship just upside down. But yeah, same sort of thing. One of the things that I always thought would be the most unfortunate thing to hit on a Starfleet ship was the neck, which is very thin on the original Connie. This one is thicker, being custom. And I have this one going down into an Excelsior class's secondary hull, as well as some shorter struts or pylons to support the nacelles, which are more the style that you see on the Sovereign class. It's more modern, and this is more kind of beefed up and built up. It's just more Exeter class, I think, with the saucer and the nacelles. Those are, I think, the parts that I used when I customized it. And the other thing to compare it to, another custom model. This, by the way, is also set as 4-inch, even though it's much larger. And so this is a more built up, more modern version of this. And I think most of the parts come from the Shikar variant. So you have a more built up, aggressive look from the tactical pod, and you can compare them directly to the bridge, which looks like it's heavier, has a heavier armor, and the nacelles, which are boxier, beefier. And you also have this bit of pod to the end with the engines on them that you don't really have on this one. So it definitely looks more built up, more battle ready. But the Miranda class is the first ship that you get in the main Starfleet storyline in Star Trek Online. So that's what I did with it, basically. So that's those 3 models. I do like the compactness of the Miranda class, but this just feels more powerful. And it kind of is, because this is a frigate, This is a cruiser. And cruisers are generally more powerful, I guess. On to the next ones which are related. And we'll kind of bring them in. Although, I don't think I'll be able to fit all of them. And I do want to be able to take them out to look at them, so I will try not to have them block one another. Or maybe I'll just have these ones on for now. So these are Excelsior Class, NXR-NCC 2000. It started out as an experimental NX, and then it became an NCC on its duration. Then we have the USS Enterprise NCC 1701C, both the Robert concept version and the version that was used in the show itself in the episode Yesterday's Enterprise. And they are indeed related, as you would see that the Enterprise B was an Excelsior refit. It had some things built up more, mostly so that there would be an area for Kirk to be in when he was sucked out by the Nexus in Star Trek Generations. But you can see the more square pylons on this with longer nacelles. I do kind of like the Excelsior because it's a beefier type of thing. It really does look like a workhorse, warhorse type of unit because it's so built up. Like, it can be used for a bunch of different jobs because it has the capacity of it. And you have the Aztecing kind of Nouveau Art type of decoration on the neck, as well as a different kind of housing for the deflector dish. And it was a different kind of dish when you moved from the show to the first movie because it's more energy based, one supposes. And just the longer body. You think that it was a very different yet good design, and I'm glad that they had it because I really liked having this kind of design. It's still recognizable just the same way that the Enterprises were always recognizable, and it has its own unique features as well. This, by the way, is another micro machine, as you can tell by it being the same hull color as the Reliant. So I really liked that. And they did come with these stands, which we liked to pretend, my brothers and I, that when we did like this, they were tugs. Space tugs. So that is the Excelsior and Excelsior Class. Next, I can talk about the version of the Enterprise B that was featured in Yesterday's Enterprise. The dish looks more like the Enterprise A's dish, and it kind of bears out from the size and shape of the secondary hull because it's smaller. But you still have the kind of decoration that you had on the neck of the Excelsior, just lighter. So it's kind of interesting to see that. That's the wrong one. It's here and here on the neck. And again, you've got the squared pylons for the nacelles, but the nacelles are kind of bigger versions of what you see on the Enterprise D, the Galaxy class. So you kind of start to see where it bridges from the technology of the C, which is Ambassador class, to the D, which is Galaxy class. Also, you have the square saucer section, which is just like the Constitution class, whereas, oh yeah, that's still circular. So circular saucer sections were still a thing, even on the Enterprise B or the Excelsior. It was only changed, or it got changed, when you got further along with the Galaxy class, and it's not a change that I frequently like. But this looks like a more compact ship, but also a nice transition from the B to the D. And it was only really conceptualized, well, it was conceptualized different, as you can see. But the reason why it was changed is something that I will get to shortly, and I will also keep both models on here visible. So the Provert concept, and we'll move that more to the back so that it's less in the way of the camera. It's pretty sleek. It still has that decoration. The pylons for the nacelles go up and forward a bit. The nacelles themselves look pretty sleek, in my opinion. You still have the two smaller impulse engines there and a kind of blocky neck. But I definitely like the fact that the necks, as of the Excelsior, were more built up. They seemed like they would be able to take more hits if they needed to. Again, circular saucer. A lot of detail on these Eagle Moss models. And you can see the phaser strips all the way around. Now this did have something of an appearance in the next generation, but it was as a half bust featured in a ready room, so you saw kind of half like this, sticking out of a wall among other half busts of ships. The reason why it was never featured as this within any show was because mainly budgeting. They didn't have the resources really to make this into a full model, and so this isn't what appeared in the episode Yesterday's Enterprise. This back here is. And it's a kit bash. Kit bash of many classic elements with a few new ones thrown in, because those parts were already available to the show crew, and so they put those on because it worked. And that's also the way they made a few other ships. Not to neglect the old Miranda class. Well, so you get the hatchback from old parts mixed with some new, because it's also a kit bash. On to the next. The last set of models that I have here with me before I'll have to go to my shelves in order to get the next ones. Let's see. That can fit on well enough. These stands, I don't know why they disconnect so easily, especially considering the weight of some of these models, but they do. I'm going to place it on. Okay, fine. That'll have to do. So here we have the USS Enterprise NCC 1701D Galaxy class. We have the, is that the Honshu? NCC, I'm trying to follow. 80205. It's a Nebula class. And a Galaxy X variant Yamato class custom. Get another. Make sure you're staying hydrated. one thing to keep in mind with this is that it is an old toy by Galoob that was designed and released before Star Trek The Next Generation even started. This is why the strips on the nacelles as well as the deflector dish are bronze rather than their activated colors. This was based on the illustration that Galoob had before the show, and this is how the ship showed up then. That said, this toy is completely made out of metal. It is very heavy, so on top of having a front heavy design, that will never be able to stand on its rear. It's just generally very heavy. You could hurt someone with this thing before it would break. But it is a very cool toy that I have had since my very early childhood. And it kind of shows in the wear and tear of the paint. But it's also kind of funny the scale that it shows, because if those are windows, then the people would be very, very tiny. And that's the bridge. But you do have a bunch of details like the pinstriping and livery, that's very good. The phaser strips are all over the place. You have the lettering. Although the screws in the bottom are kind of distracting. And of course, if you tilt and pull, carefully though, you will have access to the saucer separation feature. And while I did mention that this thing is heavy, on the inside of the saucer is hollow. But it also shows the metal. You have to be careful of this because the tab can shake and loosen. I wasn't the only one with the model in my family. My older brother also had one. Well, that's the saucer. And as for this section, it always kind of looked goofy like this in the show because of the quality of the CG. But this definitely looks more aggressive without the saucer section, which is where the civilian population would be in a battle. And so you've got this kind of truncated head off from the wide neck with the battle bridge on top. So I always thought it was cool having this. And in order to redock it, you put it in an angle and click. And that's engineering, I thought. But the engineering bit is over there. So it's a cool toy and model to have, and it's also kind of fun to compare it to the Eagle Moss models because they're from a different era, and the composition of it is very different. There is still some metal in the Eagle Moss models, but they're mostly plastic, and whereas these are painted parts, you can have some clear plastic on the Eagle Moss too. Which brings us to the Honshu, I think it was. Yes. Honshu NCC 60205 by misread. But that's okay. Again, similar to the Miranda class, this would be the hatchback version of the Galaxy class. This is a more specific version because on a lot of the other versions of this, this would be kind of slack-jawed, more open, but it also shows the coloring of the dish as it's activated, as well as the clear blue of around here. But trying to get this model, trying to get one that's serviceable, is a bit of a problem. See, the quality control of these has a record of being exceedingly poor, so that when you try to see how things are aligned, it's just not right. And I had also gotten one for my brother, my oldest brother who is still around, and gave him the one that was more correct. I took the one that was less correct, cut off the tactical pod that's here and then glued it back on straight. So that was how I corrected this thing. I believe the Honshu is the one that came at the end of Star Trek Generations to rescue the crew of the Enterprise after it crashed. And there are different pods that can be used on a Nebula class. For example, a sensor dish. I think there's one that has more nacelles too. But this is the one. There are two that EcoMoss has. It has the Phoenix, which has the dish, and it has the one with the tactical pod, which is this. I do kind of like the compactness of it, even though since it uses Galaxy class parts, it is a massive ship. I mean, you get a sense for it, most especially in First Contact, because during the battle of Sector 001, where is this caught? One is flying around, and there's a what do you call it? The war canoe type flying beside it, which is also a generation with this, and the other ship is tiny compared to it. So now let's look at this custom Yamato class, which is a variation of the Galaxy X, featured in an alternate future of All Good Things. And as you can see, this wasn't one of my customs, this was someone else's that I got at the time. Same scale as the other customs that I have. And they used a lot of dark colors. I'm not really sure what these are, but they're evenly spaced and they're kind of all over the place. It kind of makes me think that it's where things were built up and it was shaped down. I guess I could send them off, or they might be turret placements, I'm not sure. But you've got cannon placements on either side of the bridge, here and here. You've got that third nacelle. But the Yamato class and its variant look like a more refined and sophisticated version of what would happen with the Galaxy or Galaxy X. I think the version without the third nacelle and the cannons there are called blanked. I had it before what it's called. Not Yamato. That's this version. But it does have its own name within Star Trek Online. And speaking of which, with the proper concept of the sea, because of the battle where the Enterprise C was originally slated to be destroyed, it's the Narendra system. So this got named the Narendra class within the STO in honor of that, which I think is pretty cool. So I like the fact that you have this smoother transition down the back, and you have these squatter more compact nacelles. So I do think that looks more refined than the original Galaxy X. I really like this design. Even though, of course, it's as front heavy as ever. You're not going to be able to change that on this design. So I will get the next set and be back. I was trying to get the ones that were more of a generation with each other, but it just doesn't quite work out that way, does it? In any case, let's start off with these three, or rather I should say these 2.5. The Defiant class and the Saber class. A lot of the ones that will follow will have been developed in response to the Borg threat, in particular in the wake of the Battle of Wolf 359, which is survived by Commander Benjamin Sisko, but not by much by his wife or the crew of the Saratoga, which was a Miranda class. So not because it was a Miranda class itself, but because of the Borg's strategy being fueled by a captured and assimilated Captain Jean-Luc Picard. We'll start off with the Defiant itself. A pretty non-traditional design for a Starfleet ship, but it does still have all the elements there if you look hard enough. Here is the saucer section. The pylons are integrated into the armor, and then the nacelles are here and here. The secondary hull is all over the place, and everything else is, well, part of a new and generally unique design, at least for this one. The deflector array and sensor suite is right up front, where it's most important to be, and it's also been said that that is a warhead that can be jettisoned, combined into here. Oddly enough, this is also a piece that can swivel slightly. It is a very aggressive looking design, and one that has become legendary within Star Trek's own frame, or the frameworks and its lore. It looks like it could be a fighter, rather than looking like the other things in Trek, with the saucer section and everything else. It's a pretty small ship, very agile, and it also punches way above its weight class. Within the rubric of the show, it was so powerful that it threatened to tear itself apart when it was being tested, until certain changes and fixes were made by Chief O'Brien. He really is a miracle worker. Again, within the show. Let's move that off. Kind of interesting how that mounts to the thing. Next, we talk about the Saber Class, and this is the USS Jaeger, I believe, NCC 61947, also developed as part of the anti-Borg program. This would be a larger ship, slightly less wieldy than the Defiant class, which was very, very agile. But this would essentially serve the same role as a Miranda class. So it would be going around escort, sometimes strike. But the Saber class isn't very popular in Star Trek Online. I don't know why it doesn't get chosen all that much, but I did choose it. That's what this is. A custom Saber class with Cadillac fins for nacelles, which I really, really like. I gave it a more aggressive look, more built up, just like my custom Miranda. But it does do everything that a Saber class ought to do. And you can see, for comparison's sake, exactly what is different from version to version, and I really like this customization. Though I will admit that I didn't use the Saber for very long. With that aside, I will bring in the next two. I don't have an Intrepid class. Well, I would say I have something better. In some way. Assuming, of course, the stand wants to stay together. There is the Sovereign, and here is the Akira. One thing I gotta say about these stands, they can be very finicky as well. Again, these were part of the response to the Borg threat, making things more angular, making things more aggressive, and ready to respond to that kinds of threats across the galaxy to the Federation. Well, it can become something of a full-time job of itself, one supposes. We'll start off with the Akira class, and also mention that the variants of this particular class are all named for anime. So this one is the Akira. There's one between that I don't particularly remember at the moment, and then you have the Alita, which is the more recent version for Star Trek Online. So here you have an interesting design with twin pontoons joining with the tactical pod in the back, and struts or pylons that go almost all the way across to the nacelles, which are more angular and rectangular like the older nacelles like you would find on the Miranda and Connie. But you still have all these clear parts as well. From the back, you also get a pretty aggressive profile, although for some particular reason with this model, they did not use clear parts or paint for the impulse engines. I painted those myself. I thought that was a bit strange. And then from the front like this, and you see the little deflector dish here, and from the side again. The role that the Akira class fills is it's a tank support. It's fairly large and unwieldy, so it's more of an engineering vessel within Star Trek Online. It can take a lot of hits. It can't turn and maneuver very fast, but then again, it doesn't really have to when it can put out more punishment and take more punishment than the enemy, generally speaking. Also, if you turn it upside down, it still looks very cool. And also perhaps a bit like the NX-01 Enterprise. May have, in fact, inspired it design-wise because it's so very similar, or they're similar to each other. And this one first appeared in First Contact, and Enterprise was created afterwards. So it is a fan favorite design and ship, even though it may not be the best, or even one of the best, it's still considered pretty up there. And the stand connects like so. And you can kind of see on the tactile pod there's like a rotary part to it because it's intended to fire torpedoes at a very rapid rate. And let's move on to the Sovereign. This is currently my favorite design of any Starfleet ship. It's very sleek, very aggressive. It basically goes back to the Connie. Takes its the aspect that says you don't want to be standing in front of this if you're the enemy, and dials it up to 20. So it's got a very thick neck, very smooth transition from the saucer section, which, while it's as long probably as on the Galaxy class, it's turned the other way. So it's rotated and it's more balanced so that it's not quite, it wouldn't be quite as front heavy, but it's still going to lean forward like that. But this very angular, very sleek and aggressive design is something that I don't think Starfleet can deny is for a war machine. And you've got some very long nacelles here. They got rid of the whole changing angles thing from Voyager because they found a way to go to warp without damaging subspace by this time. And you've got a pair of very large impulse engines. On one of the toys, they thought this area here was the impulse engine, but that's the main shuttle bay, as opposed to back here, which with the original Enterprise and Enterprise IA, that was the shuttle bay. So it's kind of interesting that they still have it. The reason why they have the pylon sweeping back instead of forward, which would make it more compact, is that forward, someone said that it made it look like a chicken or a turkey. So try not to picture that in your head. But this is the Sovereign class, USS Enterprise NCC 1701E, one of the most current forms of it, although the F is also in Star Trek Online. One of my favorite ship designs currently is this one. Took a while for the Enterprise F to grow on me, by the way, but it has. So I will get the next ones and be back. Oops. So if my microphone was on, you would have heard something fall just then. Thank you for the follow, Lunar was here, with underscores. I do greatly appreciate it. Anyway, I should have gone back to this earlier, but I forgot about it as it was more to the side. This is a variant of something you'll probably not guess because it is very, very different in appearance from it. So, a variant of the Constellation class, of which the Stargazer, one of Picard's most favorite ships, is a member. So it had the circular primary hull, a very skinny secondary hull, some longer pylons, and the nacelles were very close together, still 4, and back. This one is definitely a more aggressive type. It's definitely more fit for battle and compact. And I definitely like the way that it looks, although in its own way it looks beefy. Like it's got a lot of armor on it. But I forgot about that one because it was over on the far side, past where the more advanced ships are on my line. Ships such as these. This is a, well, it's not actually the Chimera class, it is a variant called the Manticore class. The Chimera class was the result of the contest to design the Enterprise F, the next Enterprise. So one of the entries was kind of like this, and while the people at Cryptic liked it, they said, well, this isn't quite an Enterprise, but we're not going to waste it either. We're going to use it. No. Okay, that's nothing. Someone was phoning, but it's a long distance thing. Yeah. See? I can tell when it's a voicemail. Hello. It sounds like that. So, what's fun to know about this is that the Chimera class became the ship that was commanded by Captain Nog, the first Ferengi Starfleet officer, and also Rom's son, Quark's nephew. So he became a very important part of the story. Unfortunately, his actor did pass away, and so his involvement in missions has been strongly curtailed ever since. But this ship is pretty cool. It's got 4 nacelles just like this one does. And one of the things that's fun about it in Star Trek Online is that it has a tactical mode where the pylons become angled, the nacelles get a bit closer in, I think, and far more importantly, the saucer opens up. This part that's here comes down in front of the deflector dish, and then it fires massively powerful phasers all around it. So when this comes down, it redirects power from the dish and from the drive to the phasers, which allows it to do that phaser blossom move, which is awesome, and it's one of my favorite ships in the entire game. So I really like the fact that I was able to make a model based on the more built up, more advanced Manticore variant. So that was something that I enjoyed. Next we have, well, maybe I should talk about this one later, since it comes in later. Coming in from left field. I changed my mind. We'll do this one next. Was this the Norway? No, this is the Budapest. NCC 64923, I think. This thing, I can't help but be reminded of a shovel. The bottom is flat, but it otherwise looks like it would be a very, very capable science ship. It's got some strange aspects to its design, sure. It's very flat. The secondary hull is long and skinny here, but it has all the aspects that you would expect from a Starfleet ship, which makes me wonder why there aren't more ships that aren't designed like the Defiant class. But this thing, basically a shovel. Yeah, kind of an interesting design in that way. I don't think it would be used on any planet. You can see the shuttle bays numbered there, and the impulse engines. It just kind of looks vulnerable in a bad way, but if it's in a support role and there isn't any military action, it would be a good one to have. So that's what this is. What is designed for battle, but probably shouldn't be in it, is the USS Prometheus. NX 5 or 69650. This was built, I'd say, using data from Intrepid class missions, including that of USS Voyager. So that's why it looks a lot like a quad nacelled version of Voyager with the long spade-like saucer section, the primary hull. It's got 2 phaser strips up here, 2 on the bottom, and I think there's some more there. It would make sense. It's got phaser strips actually all over the place. And a mini nacelle right there on the top. Reason being that it has a multi-vector attack mode, where it splits up into 3 sections in order to attack its target in a coordinated manner. And unfortunately, when the Romulans found this out and they captured it, they used it to great effect against people trying to get it back for Starfleet. But the way this splits is you have almost the entire saucer section. That's where it splits from, and it goes up. The rest of the drive splits top and bottom. So you have one section that ends kind of around here in the top, and the other section that ends here for the bottom, and they all fly together. The reason why this has a mini nacelle and not a full one that can fold out is so that it can maintain a warp field if it needs to. At most, it would be able to go up to warp 1, but it can't maintain high warp at all. I don't think. And of course, as it was an experimental starship that was fielded by Starfleet, it got stolen almost right away. Kind of silly, but that seems to be what goes on. Now, this version of it seems kind of blocky, but there's a version in Star Trek Online called the Hestia class that is more streamlined that I like much more, and that's what I'm currently using in the game. So that's the Prometheus of the Prometheus class. Next, let's talk non-Starfleet with the Rising Corvette. Looks like it would be fast in the water. It's got kind of a twin hull catamaran design, which I like. Definitely looks marine. And it's one of the ships that you could get from the summer events on Risa. So, and just in case you were wondering, this is the front, this is the back. It might not have been all that obvious, but it's an interesting design, and I was pleased that they were able to print it with so much detail, especially considering all of the stuff that's in the middle. But it's a nice ship. I like it. It's pretty maneuverable within the game. And it comes with some pretty good stuff. I think it's got a wake type console where you can leave a trail that's turbulent and damages the enemy. Last of this set is another event ship from Star Trek Online. It is the AFS Khitomer class, the first ship designed and built by the Khitomer Alliance. So it has strong aspects of the Klingon D series cruisers. It's got nacelles that are reminiscent of both the Romulans and the Jem'Hadar, and a saucer section with a deflector dish on the bottom, which makes it look Starfleet, as well as the coloring. Interestingly, some of the type that's on it, I don't know if my camera can focus in on it, but it's in Klingon. Not sure if it's that side really or this, but that symbol there is the Khitomer Alliance symbol. One of these sides is in Klingon, but I'm not sure which. It was. Well, that's pretty focused in, but I don't think it's Klingon. But in any case, that is the Khitomer class cruiser. It does come with a cloak. It's a pretty okay ship within the game, although that also depends on what consoles you stick on it, because you can stick more on these things. And I will get one more section of stuff, and then I will end the stream afterward. So stand by while I get the next set. Alright, these will indeed be the last ones, after which I will end the stream. But we have some non-Fetty type ships, aliens. So, kind of going backwards there, Bob. Okay. First we'll have the Romulan Devaro, I think. There are two types that are exactly like this. Devaro and the Tliss. I think the Tliss is the type that looks older, but this one I believe was featured in Star Trek Enterprise, making it actually than the other type. Even though it looks more advanced and more streamlined. And you can see by the nacelles what I meant by the Gundam class having nacelles that are like that. But if you look back there, you also see similar shapes on the Jem'Hadar ship. Now this looks pretty sleek but also aggressive. It is essentially a bird of prey, Romulan bird of prey. And it would have probably been equipped with a cloak. The versions of it in Star Trek Online definitely are. And it's one that the Enterprise would have had to watch out for, regardless of which Enterprise you were talking about. I rather like the design. Some of it is simple, but it's also got a lot of detail on it. So that is the Tavaro. I'll also go here to pick up the Xindi, I believe, humanoid type. There's also a reptilian type. This looks like it could pinch you with the claw. But it's got some interesting textures on it too. And I like how aggressive it looks and also how alien it looks. It doesn't look like it would be very friendly. But the Xindi are a culture of mixed races, so who knows how they might be. I don't really know. I didn't watch. I just think that it's a cool design. I think it's from Star Trek Enterprise as well. And you can see with the clear parts all the way through to the other side. And that's pretty cool. I wanted to bring that as well. Let's go to the Voth city ship next. That was kind of hard to remove. It's kind of weird that the bottom is flat like this, but these are massive. It is called a city ship after all, which means that it can contain quite a lot, including entire starships. The Voth are a race of reptilians who lived in the Delta Quadrant and felt that they were the first ones there, and as an elder race thought they were entitled to quite a few things that they actually were not, being that they weren't one of the elder races and they were actually from around Earth. So they had a number of misconceptions about themselves, but they do like to build massive ships, and this was one of them. It's kind of a cool design, at least from anywhere angle but down. I don't know why it's like that. I'm not sure it's supposed to be. I'm pretty sure it's not. But the Voth are also a race that you encounter in Star Trek Online, and it's kind of cool to have this. Blasts. I'd rather have that on. One of the Jem'Hadar attack ships. This would be a medium-sized capital ship, I guess. And one of those fielded by the Dominion, one of the greatest powers in the galaxy, headed and homed inside of the Gamma Quadrant on the other side of the Bajorn wormhole. This definitely looks like it's intended for war. Got that whole thing underneath that's probably a cannon. And engines and projections all over the place. It looks very aggressive, just as this looks aggressive. In fact, there's a lot of the similar shapes in both of them. And they could really be related, but the Jem'Hadar are not according to the story of Star Trek Online. But a lot of those same sweeping, aggressive shapes, but with the front of this being even more aggressive, some fins on the sides and top. It's kind of a fun design, even though it wasn't fun to go up against them at all. I mean, there's a whole big war, and again, the nacelle shape being very familiar. Although, there's a lot less clear plastic on this guy. And there's lots of vibrant purple. And it's just a very aggressive looking shape. How did that attach? Oh, like that. That's very different. I like that. So there are those. I said I would end at around this point, but what I want to do, I'm not sure I could set up in time for it. I'm tempted to go into Star Trek Online and show you how the Prometheus class separates, but I think I'm pretty much out of time here. So I will indeed set up to end. So, it's just, since I still have these here, set them up on the turntable and turn the tables. And I will thank you all for watching. If you like what you saw, of course, I have other VODs. You can check me out on my YouTube. I have gameplay reviews and model building. You can also check me out on my Twitch, where I have some VODs and streams. And you can drop me a follow, as some other people have done this stream. I would greatly appreciate it. And again, I would like to thank Foregathers, Deprived Life, and Luna was here for following today. And of course, you can follow me on my Twitter. I rarely do use it, but I do use it. And if you're following me over on my YouTube, you can, of course, like, comment, notifications. Dropping me a follow over on Twitch will do the same. You'll get notifications when I go live or when things are new. So I will now choose who to raid. I don't think I've ever raided V. Let's do it. So thanks again for watching, and until the next stream video or whatever, please do stay safe, stay healthy, and be excellent to one another. Bye-bye, and have a great day. And I have to stop my music.
Okay. Wow, great start. Hi. Oh shit, wrong screen. Ah! Okay. Better. Hi. Behind the scenes of